You ready? Okay. All right. Call this meeting to order on April 6th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mayor Mahoney.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ott.
Here.
Trustee Antonopoulos. She's not online either. Okay. Trustee Kimberly.
Here.
Trustee Jeffrey.
Here.
Thank you. Trustee Westcott.
Here.
Trustee White.
Here.
Thank you.
And yeah, just want to remind everyone, everybody did it, but turn your mics on and off so we don't lose anything. All right, approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Trustee Ott.
Yes.
Trustee White.
Yes.
Trustee Antonopoulos. Sorry, I should have left her off. Mayor Mahoney.
Yes.
Trustee Jeffrey.
Yes.
Trustee Westcott.
Yes.
Trustee Kimberly.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, and did we have any audience business back there at all? Okay. All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are the payment approval report in the amount of $151,368.98, as well as the March 16th, 2021 minutes. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Jeffrey.
Yes.
Trustee Westcott.
Yes.
Trustee Kimberly.
Yes.
Trustee White.
Yes.
Mayor Mahoney.
Yes, and motion carries.
Ott, sorry.
Was there an issue, Linda?
No, we're trying to see the attendees, and for some reason I
Okay.
can't get my screen to show me
All right.
those.
All right, next item is action item, public hearing.
Oh, Mayor?
Yes.
I'm sorry. So we do have 3 attendees. Do you want me to confirm with them just to make sure that they're here for that? I think most of them are here for the public hearing of for action item 7A. I don't know what the one that has the phone number that ends in 7440 is here for, though. Would you like me to check with them?
Yes,
or-
please.
Okay.
Just to see, make sure we're not missing anything.
The person that has the number ending in 7440, if you would unmute yourself, and then let us know if you are here to participate in audience participation or an item on the agenda.
It's Charlie Foster.
Bill and Charlie, right. They're here with you? Okay.
Yeah, Charlie, that's Charlie Foster, who ends in 744.
It is him. Okay, so he's just on twice. Okay.
Oh, he's on twice?
Well, I'm sure, my guess is he called in then. I just didn't know Charlie was, okay, so then we're
Yeah, so
good.
he doesn't have a TV camera, so he's just.
Okay, then I think we're good,
Okay.
Mayor, for
He
the,
needs a picture of his face.
okay.
But I don't have a presentation. I'm just interested in the agenda item.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and with that, we'll move on to the public hearing. Maureen, did you want to introduce, or you want me to go ahead and just open it up?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Sura, who represents the town on oil and gas matters, is here to present ordinance 2021-665 to you. This is a public hearing on this ordinance. It is an amendment to Chapter 19 of the Lochbuie Municipal Code, which is our land use code. And so we have published a public notice in the newspaper of the public hearing this evening. So Mr. Sura, it looks like he's busy setting up his computer so he can share his screen with you all, and then he can get going.
Okay. Maureen, would it be prudent to go ahead and open for the public hearing before he starts?
Well, I think it's
Or do you wanna
best
wait
if we
till
just
after?
get a little presentation from him
Okay.
on the ordinance itself.
Okay, we'll do that.
Mayor, I don't know if you're interested in moving stuff around on the agenda to give them an opportunity to get set up, but I'd be happy to take on the food truck conversation now, and we could, if you want, it's up to you.
Well, yeah, I don't want to wait around too much, but I also don't want to get too mired into something and then have them finish up what they're doing either.
Well, they'd have to
You guys,
wait.
Mr. Suri, you have much longer on there? Okay. Well, in that case, you guys going to be a few minutes. We'll go ahead and I'll allow Maureen to go ahead and jump onto that.
It's up to them, it's
You still
their
working,
preference, but it
Mr.
might
Sura?
take some of the pressure off of them trying to hook up. Would you like us to get going, Linda, on the?
Ready to go? All right, well, the floor is yours, Mr. Sura. Well, at least one part of it is.
May I remove my mask? Thank you. I assume that we'll get a little bit of a reverb here.
You'll have to shut the microphone off on your computer.
Okay.
Sorry.
Can I be heard now? And the microphone as well. Excellent, thank you. My name is Matt Sura, Special Counsel on Oil and Gas Matters. I have a quick PowerPoint that I'd like to share with you all. I'm going to attempt to share my screen now. So we're here today to talk about reverse setbacks. The subject of setbacks is often discussed when it comes to oil and gas development, but typically we're talking about the setback of a new oil and gas facility to existing homes or residences or schools. That is controlled by the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. The flip side of that coin, how close homes can be built to existing oil and gas facilities, is something that is in the sole jurisdiction of local governments like the town of Lochbuie. And there are a number of issues and reasons to consider placing homes a bit of a distance away from oil and gas facilities. Oil and gas is, anyone would admit, is a heavy industrial activity. And we typically use zoning and zoning authority of local governments to separate those industrial activities from residential areas. And that is for both parties. Industrial activities belong in industrial areas. There's an understanding that there's going to be a little bit more noise, there might be more nuisance, and in fact, there may be some practices that occur in an industrial area that wouldn't be appropriate and frankly wouldn't be safe in a residential area. Likewise, the industrial activity benefits from not having residential areas and having to meet those residential expectations of noise, pollution, dust, etc. And so to look at the types of impacts, these are things that this town is all too aware of. I mean, because you have experienced Crestone Peak Resources and other oil and gas development all around you. Being in northern Weld County, you're no stranger to oil and gas development. And of course, you can see here residential development a good distance away from a very large sound wall. Those sound walls are required because otherwise they would be inadmissible amounts of noise in those residential areas, keeping people up all night long because, of course, oil and gas development occurs not over weeks, but literally months, 24/7, all the time. There's dust and emissions from heavy truck traffic. There's impacts to local air quality, benzene, toluene, ethyl toluene, things that we know are carcinogenic and are dangerous. Dust is also can be a danger, but also regional impacts to our air quality. And you can see the diesel fumes, compressor engines typically have some emissions associated with them. Storage tanks are actually designed to emit and to vent. And that is because as you have fluid that are coming into the storage tank, that fluid is going to displace some of the air that's in the tank already, and that needs to vent. And when it vents, it's venting not just air, but of course, some of the benzene that is residual in that air because it's an oil and gas storage tank. And as you can see in this picture, there's a lot of emission sources, and this is obviously very close to homes, and it's a very small oil and gas facility. There's also inherent dangers in oil and gas development. I'm not saying that oil and gas development is any more dangerous than any other heavy industrial activity, but it is an industrial activity, and it does have inherent dangers given the fact that they are producing explosive gases and flammable liquids. A well blowout near Windsor in 2013 is where this was taken. You've also seen similar things happen in Hudson as recently as 2017. A tank explosion in Greeley, that was a summer of tank explosions. There were quite a few in 2014, and this is something that happens, unfortunately, about once a month in the state of Colorado that there is an oil and gas fire. Given that there are 50,000 oil and gas locations, it is still, relatively safe activity, but not perfectly safe. It's an industrial activity, and again, there's inherent dangers in any industrial activity. The current code, if you did nothing tonight and didn't address this issue at all, there would still be requirements for a setback. And that setback requires a site-by-site analysis to design new development to be compatible with adjacent land uses. And that's in section 19.210C and under conditional uses. It also requires buffering between land uses, landscaping and screening. It doesn't say how far that buffer is, but that is going to be subject to this site-specific issue. Something that is a large oil and gas facility would have a larger buffer and screening requirements than something that was small. Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, as I mentioned, recognizes the inherent dangers in oil and gas development and has created new setback requirements that go from a minimum of 500 feet from homes to at least 2,000 feet. And so there is a strong, strict 2,000-foot setback from school facilities that is now non-waivable. Again, a minimum 500-foot setback from homes, but from 500 to 2,000 feet, they will only allow that development within 2,000 feet of a home if it meets certain criteria, including best management practices that are going to limit some of the impacts to the homeowners, the local government's disposition, the size and duration of the proposed oil and gas operations, and outreach to affected residents. Essentially, they want to see substantially equivalent protections that are put in place to ensure that residents are not experiencing living in an industrial area, that they're experiencing having an industrial area approximately 2,000 feet or more from their home. Even if it's closer, they're going to adjust to ensure that the noise, dust, vibrations, traffic, lights, and some of those other impacts are not experienced in a way that would detract from their residential experience in their homes. The Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission doesn't regulate setbacks of homes to oil and gas facilities, but it does really encourage a minimum 150-foot setback to a single well. And that has always been the case. Has been cited by some of the people here that you've heard from before, and you'll hear from them tonight. This is a relic, frankly, of a day when they had setbacks, a minimum setback, because they didn't want a derrick to fall on a home. A typical derrick, oil derrick in this case, is about 100 feet, and if it falls, they didn't want it to impact the home itself. And that was the reasoning for it. Obviously, they didn't consider the noise, the dust, the property values, the quality of life, the air pollution, frankly, that we know exists and have studied at this point. And again, that was just from a single well. Looking at multiple wells, you're going to have an impact that is multiplied. Weld County requires a 350-foot setback in residential areas of the county. And this is by far the most oil and gas wells within the state of Colorado are located in Weld County. And as you know very well, there are oil and gas wells located all around the town of Lochbuie. But if you were to go in this area, anywhere in this area, all around Lochbuie, you would be, if you were going to put new homes, you would have to be at least 350 feet from any oil and gas facilities, whether it's 1 or it's 30. Proposed changes to Lochbuie's regulations are going to be found in, if you approve them, in section 19.4.200. And we really break it into 3 phases. The pre-production phase, where they haven't drilled all the wells that they intend to. And this is important because there are staged development. There is oil and gas development that they get their permits, they drill maybe 2 or 3 wells, they find out how that well is going to do, they maybe learn something about the geology in those first few wells, and they sit on it. And in the interim, while they're evaluating the geology, there can be residential development that moves into that area and can really almost surround the oil and gas facility if there aren't adequate setbacks. And so suddenly, they're going to go back into full production 24/7 drilling and hydraulic fracturing completion operations. And that can be really dramatic to someone who is living a close distance from that oil and gas development. So what that pre-production phase does is says, until you've drilled all those wells that have been approved, there can't be any residential development within 1,000 feet of this location. And again, That's something to protect not only the landowners, but also the industrial development. They don't want to have to deal with residences. Frankly, they don't feel safe in drilling and completing when there are residences closer than 500 feet at least. Production phase. The production phase is obviously when, the 30 years, once the wells have been completed, there's going to be about 30 years where those wells are in completion and are producing. And at that point, we're looking at no new residential development within 200 feet of a facility, a production facility without wells. You can imagine a production facility being a tank battery, as an example, that doesn't have any wells associated with it. That is going to be a location of emissions. There's going to be tanker truck traffic. There are going to be impacts to that. So a minimum of a 200-foot setback for homes is appropriate. 1 to 2 wells, that's that small location that I showed you a picture of earlier, that there was just a couple tanks, maybe 1 emission control unit and 1 wellhead, and that is a 200-foot setback. From 3 to 14, we're looking at 350 feet, 15 to 24 wells, 400 feet, and 25 or more wells, 500 feet, and a flow line or gathering line at 50 feet setback. And the measurements are taken from the closest oil and gas facility. An oil and gas facility is defined in this regulation as a wellhead or any one of those production facilities that you can imagine on an oil and gas well site, a tank, something that was an emission control unit or a flare, a separator, those types of facilities. In the post-production phase, it's also important to recognize that these are still facilities that may need to be accessed. We don't like to think about it because, once a well is plugged and abandoned, we think that it's more or less done. But the reality is that right now we're in a process of going through, and any well that has been plugged and abandoned prior to 1990 is now being revisited and replugged and abandoned. And if you've built homes too close to those locations, it is going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to go back and replug and abandon those locations. So we're not expecting that because the new requirements are heightened since 1990, but we do want to make sure that if there was a problem with the casing or the cement that's downhole in the plugged and abandoned well, that it's not going to cause any issues to the surface owners. And so we're looking at a 50-foot minimum setback for those plugged and abandoned wells. And again, looking at what a setback from a facility would look like, these circles are taken from the Lac Buoy land pad. And there's a 350-foot circle. There's, I think on Lac Buoy land, there's 9 to 10 wells, so it would fall in that 350-foot setback. And so you would have a circle from the northernmost tank and northernmost wellhead and separator and the southernmost. And that would kind of define your setbacks for this oil and gas facility. What you're seeing here outlined in white is what that location is going to look like, about the size that location is going to be shrunk to once they do the interim reclamation that is required. Now this is a well that, or an oil and gas pad that has just finished completion in the last probably 6 months. So it's still in the size that you see now, which is during the drilling and completion phase. It's about 14 acres in size. That's going to be shrunk down to more like 6.5 acres once that interim reclamation happens. And again, so we're looking at that 350-foot setback, approximating maybe a little bit more in certain areas what the original well pad was, that 14-acre well pad. And I'm open for questions at this point. So the direction that I received was that, that there was an interest in looking at greater distances for larger oil and gas facilities. The reality is that in going back there, we don't really have locations right now in the town of Lochbuie that have more than the 12, the 14 wells. So 350 feet would be the greatest setback right now that would apply to any oil and gas facilities within the town.
I have no questions right now.
Mine kind of piggybacks trustee Ott. At the last meeting, we talked about the number of wells being higher, like that what you have up there, 1 through 2 being 200 feet. We talked about changing those numbers.
So we did, those numbers were changed. The numbers were 3 to 10 were going to be at 350 feet, and then 10 to 24 were going to be the expanded to 400, recognizing that in fairness to similarly sized oil and gas facilities, we decided to make sure that all of them fell into the 350 feet and below. There are locations that are one well that are also located within the town of Lochbuie, and that would meet the 200-foot setback.
Thank you.
I have nothing, thank you.
Nothing, thank you.
And I have nothing. So I guess at this time, we'll go ahead and move forward. And if no one has anything else for Mr. Sura, we're going to go ahead and open up the public hearing. Second here, back to where I need to be. Right. And the time is now 6:59, and we'll open the public hearing, and we'll take testimony. So, anyone want to speak? I don't know what we have set up here.
I don't know, I feel like I'm a traveling salesman here, you know,
Wheels.
but,
A wheel the podium?
you know, my name is Mark Bush. Boy, that's loud.
I feel a little bit more official.
Yeah, that's fine. Can we turn it down a little bit? Whoever's, it just seems really blasting. I'm walking through a mask too. But it's actually a pleasure to be in front of everybody.
What's the number on
How do you do
that?
that? 7. I don't know if,
We're going to turn it down.
I'm gonna use my bedroom voice here, but anyhow, my name is Mark Bush. I could have humor on that, but anyways, my name is Mark Bush. I'm at 905 West 124th Street in Westminster, Colorado. My company and I, Concord Partners, we're kind of the master developer of the entire Bella Vista project. We're the ones who Mr. Sura was showing the pad site there, but I want to introduce myself. I've never met some of the new board members. This is really the first time in front of them. I obviously know the existing trustees, but we've been working on the project for some time out there. We have Charlie Foster, who's on the phone with us also too, and then we also have, I wanted to introduce Bill. Bill, I apologize in advance, but Kahara Aegis, who's with the law firm Ott & Johnson. They're a land use oil and gas firm that we brought in to examine things. We have the benefit of Ott & Johnson having worked with us with our original annexation, our original plats, everything we've done in the project. Our entire project is covered by a PUD out there that we did back in, I think it was approved, boy, excuse me, either the first quarter of 2005 or 2004. So we go way back as it relates to it. And we've worked with Crestone on our site out there, and Bill's going to give a bit of a presentation. You know, we fundamentally And I guess in some ways, I really look at this issue, really not only the 1,000-foot setback, but that's there for any new wells, or the 350 setback, but I did want to just give and feel free, Matt or Steve, or to interject, but let's give a scope of the size of what we're talking about here. This is an ordinance that the existing wells, that would be uniformly applied all over the city. As far as I know, and I've done a lot of research on it, there's two multiple pad sites that are active within the boundaries of the town. That would be our project, as well as what they call the Sam wells to the south of our site. And then there's the Eppinger well, which is down on the southwest corner of 76. It's basically south and a little bit west of the 7-Eleven on Highway 2. There's only 3 sites within the town that fall under an existing ordinance. I'm of the fundamental belief that, excuse me, the 1,000-foot setback is basically banning oil and gas development or multi-pad oil development in the town. I mean, I'm going to talk developerese right now, but I want to make sure that everybody understands the scope of what we're talking here. And there's no current applications in the town for any oil and gas development on any property within the boundaries of the town. There are wells and facilities that are going to impact land, as well as the comprehensive plan for the town, particularly at a 350-foot setback. For example, the Johnson wells anybody's welcome to drive up there. It's just east of County Road 37 on County Road 4. There's the Ancana wells on the south side of 4. That area that's directly across from the city hall here is in the comprehensive plan and the master land use plan going to be what we hope to be at some point in the future. And I'm here to participate in it, but the new Lock Buoy Town Center mixed use commercial area, the 350 foot setback for the existing facilities that are within the county will encroach pretty deeply into that area. So I look at, and some of the council members that are, or trustees that are not new, I really approach everything as a public-private partnership as it relates to development within any community. I mean, what we do impacts not only our property, but residents that live 10 miles away that may be in a community with traffic and so on and so forth. So I just want to make sure that the board is keeping that in mind as it relates to these ordinances, as it relates to oil and gas. And I'm going to turn it over to Bill. I wanted him to explain what we see. And, unfortunately, we're kind of being the only stakeholder that's really, we're kind of, and I'm conscious of this, I don't want to, we're kind of being painted as to being the guys who are, out here contesting the 350-foot setback. Bill's going to get a little bit, we have some exhibits we wanted to show you. We have a 13.4 acre area around this oil and gas pad that's not developable. There's areas where this 350-foot encroachment, the setback ordinance would encroach beyond 13.4 acres and deny us. There's economic consequences, obviously, for us in our project to have this 350 creep outside that 13.41 acres. I mean, Mr. Sir referenced them going back to an interim reclamation area of 6.5 acres, but really the easement's 13.41. And our agreement is that we wouldn't plat or build any homes within that. So there's some areas where this 350 encroaches outside of that. I think we've made a very conscious decision to be responsible developers in terms of our setbacks out there. And there's some unintended consequences for adopting these things. Like I mentioned, areas that there's oil and gas facilities that aren't within the town, and as well as in the situation with our property. So there's economic consequences for us. There's also economic consequences for the town to forfeit those areas, particularly in a mixed-use development that is, we all hope to see someday across the street from us here, but also for our project, not just an assessed valuation, but everybody keeps in mind every house that we don't build is $30,000 less coming out of this, going into the city's coffers. We fund pit water plant investment fees, sewer plant investment fees, public safety fee, traffic improvement fees, water resource fee of $1,000 a house that goes into the town's money to buy water resources. So there's a list of things that should be considered, or I'm asking the board to consider as they think through this existing well setback. But with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Bill. Bill, are you there, out there in the hinterland?
Yep. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, and I'll probably close with some comments after he's completed, but I appreciate everybody's attention to it, and nice to meet the new trustees. Okay. Bush?
Okay. As long as everyone can hear me. My name is Bill Kuriagis. I've spoken with you before. I'm an attorney with Auden Johnson Robinson, Neff and Raganetti in Denver. Address is 950 17th Street, Suite 1600, Denver, Colorado. As Mark said, I'm here representing Lac Bowie Land. That's the developer of the project, sometimes known as Blue Lake. We participated in the discussion with the board on this matter at the March 2nd meeting. Definitely want to thank the trustees for allowing us to have that open conversation and to involve us in the process, and also for making staff available. Mr. Ann and also Mr. Sura have been helpful in being willing to talk with us and share information. And through those conversations, and also I think some clarifying changes in the language in the ordinance since it was originally presented, I think we have a better understanding of what the impact of this reverse setback ordinance would be if it applied to this project. Unfortunately, we are still concerned that this would have a significant negative impact from a financial perspective on this project. We don't oppose the town enacting a reverse setback ordinance, but we think as a matter of fairness, it should really only apply to new projects so that landowners can make informed decisions about both agreeing to oil and gas development projects for their properties, and also in planning for residential and other development on their properties. And the problem we're dealing with here is that we have a situation where the rules are sort of changing in the middle of the process. And for just sort of perspective on this, where my client's coming from, this project's been in development since prior to 2004. The land was annexed to the town, and the town and Lac Bowie Land entered into a development agreement that provided vested rights protections for 40 years. And the reason for that is it's a sort of long-term multi-phase project that there was a recognition that there was going to be a significant investment and long-term financing commitments that the developer was making to build out this kind of project that literally takes decades. And the idea with vested rights is for the rules relating to development to really remain stable to the greatest extent that they can. In 2017, my client entered into a surface use agreement with Extraction Oil and Gas. It later became Crestone Peak Resource Holdings. That's the oil and gas developer of the site that Mr. Sura put up on the screen earlier. That was to allow oil and gas development on the western edge of the project. That decision was based in part on Lac Bowie Land's understanding of what kind of impacts it would have. They were always, certainly in 2017, intending that this was going to still be the development project that they had been planning. And in that context, they weren't, there was no expectation of any kind of reverse setbacks beyond the 150 feet that Mr. Sura had referenced. So our position is that this ordinance should not apply to a project like this Blue Lake development because it has vested rights. There's a couple of reasons for that. The first is just that it interferes with the expectations, the investments, and changing the rules in the middle of a project, a multi-decade project like this, just creates a real challenge. The second, and I'll share my screen, I hope this will work here. Oops, let's see. Try this one more time. Okay, can you see the image up on the screen? Okay, thank you, Ms. Blackson, for nodding. So the second issue is we already have what we believe is to be a reasonable buffer. What Mr. Sura was talking about is getting a bit of a distance away from oil and gas facilities. We have here a 13.41 acre easement for what's called the oil and gas operations area. That's an easement in favor of the oil and gas developer. It's the red line that's outlined here. It goes well beyond the drilling equipment. It goes actually well beyond what Mr. Sura referenced as the existing interim reclamation area, which is sort of a closer in boundary, the 6.51 acres. And so this functionally creates a setback of over 200 feet from the equipment to the edge of that easement area. And my client has no ability to develop any kind of, residential or other mixed uses within that sort of red, pink outlined rectangle there. The other thing you can see on here to the south, there's an 85-foot transmission line easement that is also beyond the edge of the easement area. So that's an additional 85-foot buffer to the south. And so this is just a measurement from Google Earth showing what the distance between the outer edge of that easement area is to the actual sort of closest oil and gas equipment that's right there. It's 235 feet. Not only that, and it that maybe give or take a couple feet just based on, exactly where you measure from, but it's over 200 feet. Not only that, there's also going to be a berm and landscaping that would be installed inside the boundary of the easement. It's kind of more closer to that interim reclamation area. You can see that southeast of the tanks there's sort of the tank battery kind of at the right side of the image. The outer rectangle I guess it's kind of a square here, is that 13.41 acres. So inside of that, you're going to have a berm and you're going to have landscaping on top of that berm that provides screening. And then there's another gap there between the berm and the landscaping, the outside of that 13.41 acre easement area. So this proposal would extend the setbacks out beyond even the 13.41 acres. This is the image I think that Mr. Sura had showed. And so what you've got is it's really primarily to the east and to the south that you have this extending. It's mostly to the east. There's the setback to the south would extend, we believe, beyond the utility easement. And then you've got probably between 120 and 150 feet that it extends out beyond the easement area to the east. The problem that we have here is that the way the lots are configured, they're sort of, they're relatively small, long and narrow lots. You could have a significant loss in the number of lots that you can do there. I think we were concerned in the previous meeting it might be as many as 100 lots. I think with the clarification that we have about how this is going to be measured, we don't think it's that many, but we still do think it's going to be a significant hit, to a financial hit to the developer, also to the Metro District here that has a finance plan that's projected on a certain level of build out, and also to the town and fees and property taxes as well as to the county as well in terms of property tax. So based on the way that the ordinance measures, as I mentioned, we already have over 200 feet from the equipment to the edge of that easement area. And I think Mr. Sura would acknowledge that there isn't any particular science behind the 350-foot number and having that number apply to this, many wells. It could just as easily be a 200-foot setback. And we think in this case where we've got, over 200 feet from the equipment to the edge of this easement area where we can't develop, and also having the landscaping, it's important to note that, whether it's 200 or it's 350, there's still going to be a gap here and functionally a setback. I also want to be clear, and I think Mr. Bush had mentioned this, there's not going to be any new oil and gas sites placed on this property because of the existing 1,000-foot setback, and also the owner isn't going to agree to do any others. So our preference would be to address further setbacks during the platting process. This phase of the development is still years out. But when we get to the point of platting this, we'll be able to determine a specific sort of lot layout and what makes the most sense at that time. This would just be processed under the existing code provisions that Mr. Sura referenced about, sort of general buffering.
Bill, if I could interrupt you for a quick second, if I may interject here. I thought you raised some really good points. I mean, you look at we're well beyond the town's current, we were aware, we know that we're well beyond the town's current ordinance in terms of the setback that we provided for the 13.41 acres. And frankly, it's like the goalposts are getting moved on us a little bit here also too. And effectively trying to plan that area for us from a standpoint of platting and lotting lots, those circumferences, those circle circumferences are very difficult to deal with. It allows for very inefficient planning and unit counts, et cetera. That's a challenge, particularly for the product that's targeted for our community. I mean, we're not doing large lots. We're not doing, 1 acre, 2 acre, where you could have a rounded scenario like that. So that there's the domino effect as it relates to pushing beyond that 13.41 acres for us. I just wanted to make that point to everybody.
Sure. And that you can see that up here, just kind of how the shape of that goes. So our preference would be to do this in the context of platting. And I think it's really important to reference that we would be doing this in a context where, unlike a new oil and gas well setback, this reverse setback concept, you've got a context where buyers aren't going to be surprised. It's not a situation where you're preventing a new oil and gas thing from popping up in someone's backyard. The oil and gas facilities are already there, and home buyers, people buying lots, buying homes, will be able to calculate that into their analysis. We certainly understand. I mean, the pictures of buyers and the stuff that Mr. Sura had in his presentation, but this isn't the same as a regular setback. This is kind of more about protecting people from themselves. Our perspective on this is both home buyers and also my client are in a position to make educated choices about the facts on the ground, which are not a secret here. We've got, we're going to have to plan when we get to the point of platting this, what we think home buyers are actually going to be interested in buying. And not having sort of an additional governmental regulation that just imposes that in a sort of blanket way would certainly be preferable in terms of how we have flexibility as the developer to make a product that we think people are going to actually be interested in. That's important here because we already do have a buffer, which is this easement area. And our goal is to be able to develop this project really as it's been planned. At that point, we're going to know when we get to the point of platting this, we're going to know what the landscaping looks like. We're going to have specific engineering that will inform how the plats are going to be laid out. We're going to have a better understanding of what the market conditions are at the time. Frankly, we might have a better understanding of what the safety issues are, if any, for this kind of a distance. My client's certainly not interested in trying to sell lots that people don't want to buy, or that people think are, would make their homes undesirable or unsafe. And so all of those things are going to have to be balanced when we get to the point of actually sort of platting this. So our proposed mechanism for dealing with this is the exemption language. Ms. Duran had sent that around to all of the board members. That would exempt this project. Well, what it would do is it would exempt projects that have vested rights from application of the ordinance. I think that as a practical matter, this might be the only project in the town that is in this situation where you've got existing oil and gas wells that have that are sort of surrounded by land that has a vested rights agreement with the town. But we think it's a fair and a reasonable approach to take to account for the investments associated with a project of this size and the expectations that go along with a project of this size. For future projects, the next major multi-phase development that occurs in the town, people will be able to plan this into their pro forma. They'll be able to plan it into their financing. They'll be able to make investments accordingly. But that's not something we were able to do here for a project that's been in the works since really 2004. So if we can get approval, I've got the language on the screen that we had proposed. For the exemption, we'd certainly not oppose the ordinance. But I do want to just sort of flag that we do have some concerns, both to the extent that this would apply to this project, but also just in general that I think should be flagged for the town. Before we had our dialogue after the last meeting with Mr. Sura and Mr. Rand, we were really struggling to understand what the impacts of this would be. It was helpful to meet with Mr. Sura and Mr. Rand about what their interpretation of this is, and we got this drawing actually from Mr. Sura, and that was very helpful. But we spent some additional time reviewing it since then, and I think some of the definitions aren't very clear. He'd walked through the ordinance. It talks about the pre-production phase, and you've got measurements taken from the closest edge of the well site, and that's a term that's defined in the code, but it includes any area of undisturbed ground, so if you had another project that was like this, you would be taking that measurement. It's 1,000 feet, and it would go from the edge of the disturbed ground here, which is sort of the light colored dirt that was disturbed as part of that easement area. We're past that phase for this project, but it would result in just a massive setback. For the production phase, we're even more concerned because the measurements are taken from the closest edge of the term is the oil and gas production facility. That term is not defined in the code. You do have a definition in the code for oil and gas facility as opposed to oil and gas production facility. It's a very broad definition. It speaks in terms of all improvements associated with or required for the operation of a well site. And that's actually the same language you have here for oil and gas production facility. It's improvements associated with or required for the operation of a well site. And it goes on in this ordinance to talk about including but not limited to, and it lists a bunch of equipment. The definition in the code for oil and gas facility includes things even like access roads. And so what we're concerned about when you've got a definition that's sort of open-ended and has included but not limited to language, it's not entirely clear how this would be interpreted going forward. And you could have a huge impact on, Loch Buoy land to the extent that they're not exempted from this ordinance. If you're talking about 350 feet from, things that are further.
Hey, Bill, excuse me, would you mind just pointing out the paragraph that you're referencing to the board? It's in section 1 of the, I'm just gonna help you guide you to what Bill's talking about here. In section 1, the paragraph A that Mr. Sura went through is pre-production, then production phase, and then paragraph 2, which is right below the chart of the setbacks. He's saying the closest edge of the oil and gas production facilities. The example that Mr. Sura put up on the board was from equipment on the oil and gas site. And then Bill was referring to include improvements associated with required to the operation of the well site, including but not limited to. So it's not defined. It's basically whatever anybody's interpretation is, including but not limited to. And to the extent that this ordinance moves forward and we're not exempted, which I think really should be done, this to us is a red flag. Your ordinance and the USR is very specific that was done with the town. The town board approved the USR in 2018. This is a use by special review that basically gave permission for Crestone to go out and drill these wells. That was based upon the current in place ordinance. That document is, I think, minimum 11 pages long and defines every which way to Sunday. This document, what Bill was just referencing, included not limited to, and then it goes through certain things. I don't know what else is out there. Does that include a shed that they may build out there and store hammers and nails? I don't know. So that's where I just want to make sure everybody knew. Bill was kind of moving through it kind of quick, but I just want to slow it down and give you all an opportunity to reference the paragraph.
Yeah, and that's what I have up on the screen. And like I said, there's a lot of similarity to what is a very broad term, which is the oil and gas facility as opposed to production facility in the code, which would even include access roads. And so obviously you need to get access to a site. And so we're concerned that if these setbacks are going to apply, and this would not just be for this project, it might be for any project in the future, it's definitely important for it to be very clear and unambiguous so that there aren't, sort of different interpretations over time. So again, our request is that the town would approve an exemption for this project, given the sort of longstanding nature and the investments and expectations that have gone into it. But if not, I think there probably needs to be some more refinement to this, which would probably suggest, taking some more time to make sure that if this is done, it gets done right. Certainly happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you.
On the phone.
Do we have any questions from the board? Trustee White?
No?
Trustee Kumerly?
No.
Trustee Westcott?
No, thank you.
Trustee Ott? Trustee Jeffrey?
No, thank you.
By all means.
We're in pretty much constant communication with Crestone all the time. Even the landscape plan that Bill put up on his exhibits there, we're going to beef that up. We've already talked to them about that in terms of the setback there, and there's language in the USR as well as our SUA that talks about low-profile tanks. So, there's things that we're going to be doing out there to even lessen the visual impact as it relates to the site. The landman, who's our primary contact's been out on spring break for like the last 10 days, so I wish I would have a little bit more information as it relates to that, but we're certainly going to enforce the terms of our SUA and the terms of the USR that was done with the community as it relates to low-profile storage tanks. And everybody needs just another note. In terms of the impacts, the impacts that Mr. Sura showed at the beginning of his presentation were probably associated with the actual drilling operations and the completions operations. And even in there's another paragraph where he references completions, and it's not the defined term in the document. And completion can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So it's just a red flag for us developers. I think that we'd probably end up having to revisit some of those things going forward regardless in the ordinance. But we have... they're not trucking any oil or gas off the property. All the midstream is in place. Everything is going out right from the splitter out there. We have pipes. It's all getting transferred in pipes. In fact, there's water that's delivered to the site for the fracking activities out there also too. They weren't trucking in millions of gallons of water for their fracking activity. Yes, we worked with Steve and Maureen on getting a water pipeline constructed out to that area. That's feeding the fracking operations. And for example, the wells that are being drilled just north of Silver Peaks right now, I don't know if you've seen that. Silver Peaks will be impacted by this 350-foot setback, by the way, the setback from those wells. And it's actually something that probably needs to be clarified from a developer's perspective. I mean, our facilities that sit in the county is your project, if you're going to be building houses or something adjacent to it, impacted by 350-foot setback from the county, where facilities are there. Bill did a quick measurements off of our pad site where he went, I think it was with 260 feet, Bill, or something to that effect, to the edge of the 13 acres. But those wells, that well that's being drilled right now is within 350 feet of Silver Peak's existing plat. And but I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that we're not trucking things in and out of there. We're not hauling the oil and the gas and not bringing water and all those things by truck. It's all just jumps in a pipeline and heads to West Texas, I guess, or Oklahoma. But I just want to make sure that everybody was aware of that. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Is there any other testimony? Anyone else want to speak on this? Any board members have anything they want to make a statement? No? Okay. Mr. Ann, did you want to? Yeah.
Mr. Foster, did you want to comment? If so, you can unmute yourself and go ahead and make a comment.
No, I don't have anything to add, just that we would appreciate approval of the amendment to the document that Bill talked about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. That's it? No one else?
Well, we have one other number. I'm not sure. Let's see. The phone number that ends in 4544 that is listed as an attendee, do you have let's see, let me unmute you, or try to allow you to talk, and if you unmute yourself, you can let me know if you have something to talk on here. Yeah, I'm gonna say they might not.
I'm guessing that's a no.
I'm gonna say so too.
All right, well, we're gonna move ahead then. Did you have anything?
Well, Mayor, I think from the public comments tonight, there's been some issues raised that probably draw some questions for trustees that they, my guess is, would like to have conference with legal counsel on. I might suggest we schedule an executive session if that's something that the board is inclined to want to do. We have a super busy agenda this evening with already 2 executive sessions, I can't talk, scheduled. So perhaps since tonight was the night that the public hearing was noticed, perhaps you can close the public hearing. You don't have to take your vote the same evening as the public hearing. You can certainly continue it to a date certain. Maybe we could continue it to another date, schedule an executive session that night, and then open it for consideration and vote after that.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, I didn't, looking at the other one to look where we're gonna go, because, yeah, the next meeting is kind of packed too. And I don't know, yeah, I know that I have questions, I'm sure the board has questions as well, and we have things we want to bounce around and discuss. So, I'm reticent to actually even mention putting it on the next meeting because we have quite a bit going on there. I think it would be best to push forward to May 4th. Anyone have any issues with that?
Postpone it till May 4th.
Well, hold on, let me close out so we'll go ahead and close up the public hearing at 7:34 and come out and go ahead. What were you saying?
I make a motion to postpone the decision.
Hit your mic.
I move to postpone the final decision on this ordinance till May 4th.
Second.
Roll call, please.
I'd like to have a little more discussion. Do we need to include in that motion if we would like to hold an executive session prior to taking action?
You can certainly add that.
May I add that as a friendly amendment? Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Ott.
Yes.
Trustee Kimmerly.
Yes.
Trustee White.
Yes.
Trustee Westcott.
Yes.
Trustee Jeffrey.
Yes.
Mayor Mahoney.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries. All right, thank you, gentlemen. All right, next we'll move on to the discussion item, the 410 discussion. Ms. Blackson, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. The AIS that was in the board packet from last meeting is the same one, but and then we also included in the board packet the 2 comments I received that I didn't have a chance to note at the last board meeting. And then I just had a couple other items I wanted to share with the board that I didn't get a chance to share. And mostly just to give some other benefits, that assist the residents. One of those being, with having the extended hours, it does help the customers who leave for work before we shut them off, before shut-off starts. And then, they don't get home till, let's say, 5 o'clock, 5:15, and they realize that their water has been turned off. Well, with the extended hours, we are still here until 6. And so that gives them the ability to call and go, oh, my water shut off, I didn't realize it, and can I still have it turned on? So with us still being here, that actually, and us being able to go turn them on up till 6 o'clock, that gives them one less day of not having their water disconnected if they're able to pay that day. And then the other one I wanted to point out is, if the due date falls on a Friday, and with us, which doesn't happen. I think we figured out by the calendar, there's only a couple more of those left for the year. But when it does fall on the Friday, we move the date to the Monday, which gives them additional time to pay that. So, the Saturday, Sunday, and then the Monday, and then they wouldn't be charged the late fee until Tuesday. So it's kind of benefit because it gives them opportunity. Unfortunately, some are unable to make payments for financial reasons. So if they aren't paying an additional $15, that helps them. And then I did add in the packet as well all the ways that they can pay. They can call 24/7 to the 800 numbers. One gets them a live person and one is another person. Just an automatic, or what do you call it? How I'm trying to say that, an automation deal. But they can speak to someone. They can. So I just wanted to share those things, and we put that information out on the newsletter, the website, Facebook, ways for other people, to pay in case, even if it's a Saturday or Sunday, they still have the ability to pay. So I think that's all I had to share. If you had additional questions or.
Okay, thank you. All right. Questions or comments? Trustee Jeffrey?
I just want to say I'm still in favor of the 4:10 work schedule.
Okay. Trustee Ott?
Nothing, thank you.
Trustee Westcott?
Thank you. I do support the 4:10 schedule. I have personally found it very useful in terms of being able to get in and take care of business before and after work. Just really quickly, there's this sign that I used to see next to people's desks, which I always thought was not very compassionate, but it said, "Your lack of planning does not constitute an emergency on my part." And I think that the sentiment of that is true. And we do need to balance that with compassion in our obligations as public servants. But the reality is that we can't be available 24/7 to our constituents. We've made a lot of progress towards making information and resources available 24/7. The call-in, is it the IVS?
IVR.
The IVR system makes that possible for people to pay their water bills anytime, night or day. We put a lot of information online so that people can find out about ordinances and hours and all of the kinds of things that I think that people might come into town hall to ask about. But again, we do have to balance the needs of our staff, financial needs, all of those kinds of things against the needs of our constituents. And so I really do think that the 4-day week, 10-hour work week does that it allows many of our constituents to come in on the schedule that works for them, but it also incentivizes our staff to be happy at work. I do think that there's a cost benefit from only being open 4 days a week, even though I know the whole building isn't closed. And so, yeah, I totally support the 4:10 workday, or hours for the town hall. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Kimberly?
I have nothing to add.
All right. And Trustee White?
I personally don't support the 410s. I honestly feel personally, it doesn't work for me or a work schedule that my husband has. Fridays is an ideal day. Again, when I think about vendors and other people being able to come in and see someone face to face, most of the time that is something that happens late in the week, and not being available on Friday I think is a huge problem. I've probably surveyed myself about 15 of my neighbors who I socialize with, hang out with, and none of them received a call, an email, a survey. So that's not being reciprocated in what you're seeing in the surveys to what I'm hearing from people who actually live here. So I personally do not agree with it. Okay,
thank you. Well, you guys know my feeling on it. I take a little umbrage with, being closed on Friday. I know it's good for staff. I know it works well for some, and there are those that it does benefit, but I still think we're here for the citizens, and we're supposed to be here for the citizens. The 5 days a week. Anytime we start dictating and telling the citizens they have to adjust to our schedule, I take umbrage with that. But I think the board is, and I want to get a kind of consensus. We're kind of done talking about this. Let's go ahead and deal with it. Next, put it on the next meeting. Do we even need to pass anything, Maureen? Do we even need to vote on it?
No, I don't think so, because it's already been put in place. So
Yeah.
only if you wanted to overturn it.
Well, and that's kind of where I was going. So, so at this point, it's just a discussion item. We can't really do much right now, but want it on the next meeting for action. And, we'll just have the little vote and see, or kind of take consensus and see if everybody's okay with it. Nobody wants to overturn it, or everybody wants to overturn it, one way or the other. Whatever the decision is, the decision is. Go ahead.
So,
Do we have to have agreement to make it an action item? Do we have to have a vote?
Well, no, I mean, you don't, if a majority of you clearly don't want to take any action on it, I think you have to let the mayor know that. I'm just not sure where everybody's feeling. Mayor Pro Tem Ott was silent. I'm just not sure where everybody was.
Well, and that's kind of where I'm going is, we put it on for the next agenda as an action item. All we have to do is throw it up there, see if, because we can't make a decision on it right now because we're just in a discussion and we haven't given anybody the proper opportunity to come in and make their voice heard on a decision we're going to make. And the only thing that this may change, it's already enacted, it's already happening. The only thing this will do is shore it up that the majority want it or don't want it. Simple as that. So, and I don't think it's a big thing to have it put on the next agenda just to have us have a consensus. Okay, go ahead.
The prior board already did have that opportunity to hear from other people when it was an agenda item, and we did take action on it. And I don't support bringing it for action again at this time.
Okay. Well, anyone have any opposition to bringing it back? We have one opposed. You don't want to bring it back? Okay.
I'll go with not bringing it back.
Okay. Same? All right. Then it stays and we're not bringing it back. So, done. All right, next item is utility billing. Ms. Blackson.
Okay, sorry. So I have a lot of stuff in the AIS kind of explaining how we got where we are with the billing. And then hopefully it gave you enough information as far as, staff has continued to work with Next Trust to work out all the kinks. Of course, January had their big hiccups and then so for March, we got sent out on the 1st. We already have people started paying on Monday, which was the 5th. So we think all the kinks are worked out. I mean, last month was a little bit of the post office delays, and I included some post office, some articles in regards to that there's nationwide post office delays. And then, we can pretty much say that we have Next Trust squared away.
Sorry to interrupt you, but where are they mailing from?
So they're mailing from, it's Utah, is that about right? It's Utah. So they mailed on the 1st, but we already have people bringing their bills in on the 5th. So I know that they're coming from another state. And then I can't remember if it was February, it had to have been February when we mailed those out. That company took them to the post office on the 3rd, but they did not physically leave the post office. The post office did not mail them out until the 9th. So a little bit, of course, January was the delay in the post office and the hiccups with just some miscommunication. But Marches went very well. And so we're hoping that will continue. And then the only other thing I would throw out there is that having this outsourced, it gives staff the ability to have their time used more appropriately, because we have the folding machine, which we no longer have because we canceled the contract. But there are days, like Sonia, gosh, she wasn't able to be on tonight, but her first day of work, yes, we had purchased some new envelopes, but her whole 8-hour days was standing at that folder. The poor, I mean, we were shorthanded. I think someone was out that day. It was Sonia's first day, so she stood at that folder for 8 hours watching them fold and stuff and all of that. And then not only that, we had to have somebody running them through the postage machine. So when you have, even on it, so that was kind of the extreme, but staff is still spending 4 hours about a day watching those machines or running it through the postage. And with the outsourcing it, the staff can use those 4 hours or the 8 hours to do other more important, whether it is taking a phone call quicker, or taking a payment, or working on court for Crystal, or whatever it may be. So we feel that that is better use of staff time instead of standing at a folder. So I think that's all I have. So if you guys have additional questions, or if I can give more information, please let me answer.
I think a lot of the issue was actually timeliness of the mail, and that's been a huge issue. I've heard had a lot of feedback from people that were upset because their bill didn't get there in time, and they were used to it. Us mailing it, we take it right over there and it goes right out. I mean, there was nothing to have your mail or your deal by the 3rd. But that was my biggest issue. I'm good with farming it out, and outsourcing it definitely frees up staff's time. And I'm sure there's not tons of companies that are doing that, but the ones that are, unfortunately, we got to mail or send everything out to Utah, then they've got to print it all out and then mail it back to us. So that becomes a whole, but yeah. And I honestly haven't heard anything yet on the latest mailing, so I haven't had anyone complain. Trustee Westcott?
Thank you, Mayor. I was really interested in the staff recommendation about the newsletter portion of this.
So currently, with outsourcing, we do have that the lead time is the 7 days. So we have to get that newsletter to them 7 days prior because of how their equipment works and all of those things. And that would be one way that, if we made it, or the suggestion would be that if we made it an electronic version, then it would end up on the website. Now, granted, the people who sign up for paperless billing or auto pay would get that electronically that way. And then we now have that capability on the website when you do the subscribe now, and then anytime there's an update to the newsletter, it would go out to those by email. And then the other one would be, for maybe people who don't have internet service or don't have a computer, or maybe they just want, because some people really we have a few people who like the calendar on the back side of it, that they could come in and sign up for a list, and then we would send those out ourselves. And we're assuming that we would get less than 50. If we got 100, we could still mail those out by ourselves. You wouldn't have, I suspect we would get a lot less than 50 for people to sign up for that. And then we would also save the amount of money that you're paying for those to go out, one in color, and then sometimes we have the 4 pages, which is really a substantial amount of money. Because if we put the snowplow map, or we list the recycle calendar for waste management, that just brings up the dollar amount more. So we'd be saving some funds by doing that as well. And we would save that lead time. So if we get rid of that and just have it go all electronic, when those bills are done, as soon as Jamie sends them off to this next bill or the next trust, they can send them immediately. They print them immediately. They don't have to do all this other stuff with the newsletter for us. And that would go right then to the post office once they're printed. So
does that mean that it actually shortens the turnaround time? So if you get billing information to them, I don't know what day you get it to them, and then they needed 7 days because of the newsletter, but does that mean that people would get their bills sooner?
Well, it would be, so if that 7 day doesn't work because it's a 7 business day, we talked briefly about it, and Jamie could send those, because we have to do the whole meter read process, and the smart meter thing will kind of help that. We can send that to them on the 31st, it would go out the 1st. Currently, we send it on the 1st, and they still got to print them. So we could get it out there 1 day sooner, which would help with the potential delay in the post office. But, and the other part about the 7 business days is when, as the mayor knows, and Crystal trying to send out that stuff to get the information for the newsletters, sometimes that last few days really is when something comes up and you need to add, but we don't have that. And so sometimes you can't add additional stuff that maybe needs to go in that newsletter that you need out. I mean, we are trying to post those things out on Facebook and or the website if we can't get it into the newsletter. But that's another way that would help us make sure that we have those extra 7 days to add something into that newsletter. Because we would post that on the website and Facebook as soon as we send out those bills. It just wouldn't go with the bills except for to the people who sign up for paperless billing or auto pay.
Okay, well, I would just like to say that I'm in favor of making steps towards that direction. I think the cost savings is compelling, and I like the idea about being able to get people current information and faster bills. I am concerned about making sure that we do have communication with people who don't have online access. I feel like you've presented a way to manage that, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Trustee Jeffrey?
I just had an idea while I was listening to you, and I wondered if we had considered calling people that still get paper statements to see if they were interested in signing up for paperless billing. Because I imagine you spoke of our associate who spent 8 hours in front of the paper folding machine. If she spent 8 hours calling people to say, did you know this was an option? Like, I know we still have a pocket of citizens that are going to continue to get paper statements, but I suspect we could reduce it significantly if that little bit of outreach was made. And so I thought I'd throw it out since we're discussing it.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the way you want to go, we see how people, make sure that they're informed. Then the trick is, one of the things is that we don't have everybody's phone number or email, or if we have a phone number, it's not a current phone number. And that's part of the whole, I will just note that as far as that survey that went out to people by email, if they didn't get it, it's because we didn't have their email address or current email address. So we could certainly reach out to all the people we have phone numbers for. Granted, some of those probably are not current. And then just for that note, we did put stuff in the newsletter, I think 3 months, like every other month, in regards to a contact thing. Please, if we don't have your current contact, return this form to us. We only got about 10, but yes, I think that's, we could certainly do that to make sure that they have the ability to sign up for either the paperless billing and or this subscribe, so we can send it out physically to them.
I mean, even if they don't have an email, there might be some that would like to sign up for auto pay, right?
Oh, yeah, you have auto pay, and even if you just want the electronic billing, but you don't, because some people don't have the ability to have auto pay because their payday may not come until a couple of days later. But you can still get paperless billing, which just gets you your bill a little quicker, but you don't have to sign up for auto pay to get that paperless billing. Yes, and we have re-put those in the newsletter as well, but we can certainly do that, I'm sure.
It was just an idea and a thought. I mean, it could reduce our costs even more.
Sure.
And show care for our citizens, right?
Right, oh, right,
Little
absolutely.
personal touch.
Another
Thank
way to
you.
get more, to inform them. Mhm.
Okay. Thank you. Trustee White?
Okay. I personally don't like outsourcing. I'm big on the more things we keep in-house, the better, the less hands in the cookie jar. Works out way better, I believe. However, I was out of town for spring break. I just came back in, checked my mail when I got back into town. I just received my statement for, I thought this month. I was like, oh, hooray, it came on time. Nope, it's my March statement. So when I have it here, a picture on my phone, when I look at the March statement that came in the mail, up at the top, I don't know if you've seen the bills that are being sent out. There's 4 boxes in red. It says account number. The next box to the right says statement date. The next box over says due by. And the box next to that, to the farthest right, says due after. And instead of having dates in those due date boxes, it has dollar amounts.
So,
And neither of those dollar amounts match the email that came from you guys to my email for what I owe for the month. So that's where I'm having a problem. Nothing that I'm getting from the town is matching the bills that I'm receiving in the mail, even though they're late, obviously. I mean, that's a post office problem, that's completely fine. Nothing you guys have done or can do about that. But as far as the numbers not matching or the information being incorrect, it says due by, that should be a date, not a dollar amount.
So
That's where I'm having problems, is the inconsistency.
we just changed how that layout is. And so I don't have that memorized. So would you, I mean, I can't really give you the answer right now, but if you could share those copies with me, I could try to figure that out and see what happened. And you said it's red instead of blue? So that would be.
No, it's not the color. I'm just saying at the top, the box is red itself.
Okay.
But my point is simply that when something says due by, that should be a date that it's due, not a dollar amount. And then the following box says due after, which should also be a date, and instead it has a different dollar amount.
Yes.
So to me, that would typically indicate, like, pay this amount, and if you don't pay it by this day, you're gonna get a late fee for, X amount of dollars, and that will be your new total, but that's not what this says.
Right, I agree with you. I can't give you an accurate answer without looking at it again, just because we changed that format. So if you could send that to me by chance, and then I can look it over and get back to you and figure out why the difference is. We haven't had any additional, that I'm aware of, and I can confirm with Jamie, additional people call and request that have that same issue. So I don't know if it happens to be your account but again, if you could send that to me, I can try to figure out what the situation is, and that may be just, again, I haven't had any other comments in regards to that, so I'm not sure.
I will forward it to you now.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and we'll get you an answer.
All right, was there anything else, Trustee White? Okay, all right, Trustee Kummerly?
I was just curious if we knew, because, particularly I think things with the post office are going to get continually complicated with some of the proposals they're talking about of changes of how our mail will be delivered. But I wondered if we saw or have been seeing an increase in people taking advantage of electronic payment and just doing it that way versus walking in, because certainly over time, I've done less and less because of unreliability of the mail. I mean, I know personally of a situation that it took 2 months to go from Denver to Fort Lupton for a sympathy card. And that's local, let alone coming out of Utah. So I was just curious if we're seeing more residents taking advantage of doing things electronically, or if we've even tracked that.
We've been trying to pay a little more attention, just through this whole process. I'm not sure what it is actually, what the reasoning behind it is, but we have seen a little bit of an increase. But staff has also been, when people have been calling, like trying to educate them a little bit more, especially because we have the unfortunate parts like, hey, I didn't get my bill. I just got my bill, it was due today. So we've, shared all the ways to pay. And some of them didn't know about either one, the paperless billing and or express bill pay. Although we do put it in the newsletter almost every single month. So I don't know if it's the staff doing the education or the people wanting to make sure they get their bill and get it paid. So it's probably a little bit of both. And we are still encouraging them to get them to more electronic. Because, especially because we don't know what the post office is going to do going forward. We can't control any of that, but it would be nice if they could, we do want them to get their bills in a timely fashion and be able to not be stressed like, I got to pay it today and I just got it today, or I got to pay it tomorrow, or it was due yesterday and I just got my bill today. So we want to assist the residents in any way we can too. So we are trying to get that out there more to encourage that.
Anything else, Mr. Kuhn? Okay. Trustee Ott? No. Okay. Well, just out of curiosity, I know you probably won't have the numbers, but in general, how many paper bills are we still mailing out? Right now?
It's an estimate, but it's about 1923 or 19.3, because I think we have about 800 and some that do the electronic, and then the paper are 1900 and something.
So we're still predominantly mailing out?
Right.
Okay.
We are. But even the ones we're mailing out, a lot of them pay electronically. We have quite a bit who pay electronic. Some of you who weren't on the board before when we had the discussion, in regards to the 410 discussion, part of the reason of having that conversation too, because just for your knowledge, we don't have a lot of foot traffic in the building. I mean, we tracked the foot traffic for about 3 weeks, and our average foot traffic was about 10 people a day. Granted, shut-off days and due dates and the day before due dates and the day before shut-off, it was about anywhere from 75 to 100.
I'm gonna say, I'm sure it skews the number.
Yes, exactly. So it's kind of hard, but, so for that, we still have a ton of people who pay electronically, even though they may not take their bill by electronic.
All right, thank you. Yeah. And like I said, I have no problem with us farming that out as long as we're getting the issues squared away. You know, that's, like I said, the last time, what frustrates me is when the things go out and I'm getting phone calls from people about something that I know nothing about. And I know the mail's skewed and screwed and we're dealing with that. But when the company that we hire doesn't perform, we're not performing. And that's where I really get a little frustrated with it. But anyway, I don't think we really needed to do much more with this. It's already doing its thing, and I you know, as far as I'm concerned, I think it's working. And other than Trustee White's issue and some of the others, if we can get those things resolved and get that stuff fixed, I think it'll be a good system as long as they can mail the stuff out. Although I will be honest, just like the last newsletter, I had a whole thing written out, and then because the time we have to do it, it had already been fixed. The stuff, I was like, well, this is useless. Okay.
And it goes so fast, the time to get the stuff into the newsletter and then the time to get it out, it just goes, the time frame just seems like it goes so quickly that, you know, you write it all out, like you said, and then 2 days later, something else changed, or that's already passed, or by the time you get it out, it's not gonna happen, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now I'm just gonna have to keep some in the pocket. Some fluff pieces or something. But anyway.
Could I just ask for
Sure.
one question on that? So, and I appreciate all your comments, and I mean, just so you know, staff doesn't want the residents to be unhappy any more than you guys do, so we want to do the best we can for them. But as far as the newsletter, I mean, if you're all okay with, it sounded like the consensus was, and correct me if I'm wrong, about sticking with the outsourcing, but did you want us to pursue more information on making the newsletter electronic and maybe doing those phone calls, or how do you want us to proceed with that, or do we want to talk about that at a later time, or? Right.
Or you're calling a renter. Press forward with it.
Yeah, I'm in favor of pursuing an electronic newsletter and reducing costs, like Trustee Westcott spoke to.
Trustee Ott, would you like to have them make the phone calls?
The phone calls will be okay, but I still think we have too many residents that don't have internet access to go full online. No computers. I mean, a lot of people at the senior center that had no computers, no nothing, no email. So I still think we need to stick with the printed email or printed newsletter.
Are you okay? So I just want to make sure I understand. So are you okay if they could sign up with getting one, like they would sign up on a list that we would keep track of, and then we would send that to them? So that would be one of the things, that would be part of the stuff we proposed, that if you wanted it paper copy, we would send it to you, but then everything else would be electronic. So we wouldn't send it with the billing. Okay.
Trustee Westcott?
Thank you. So first of all, I think immediately we should stop printing in color if we haven't already. I don't think the cost benefit to that is worth it. So that would be my first action item. And then I don't know. I enjoyed
How am I gonna know when it's spring if they take the colors out?
Blue and the pastels. I really found the news articles that you included about the Postal Service very informative. It's not like I wasn't aware that there were problems, but I don't think I knew about the breadth of it. And so it just makes me wonder again about maybe educating customers and if we are worried about people not having access online, doing a specific mailing that's maybe includes some of this information and saying, hey, we do have options, so you don't have to use the mail, and then notify them that we're thinking about doing away with the newsletter in the billing, and giving them a phone number to call if they want to have, if they want to continue to have it mailed to them, and maybe that would solve the problem of calling out if we mail out, although mailing out is never as successful in terms of getting information as phone calling. That's my thoughts. Thanks.
Okay. All right, Trustee Kimberly?
I have nothing new to add. I agree with all the other comments.
And Trustee White?
I personally like my colored copy and paper. I'm going to be the odd one out all the time, but I'm dyslexic. I have a hard time reading black and white online, so I like having it in color and being able to see it. And I also like the color calendar on the back because I have some small children who can't read, but they sure do know that green mark is recycled aid when they take the trash cans out. So I would be fine with you guys calling. I think most people would take advantage of an online option. For me personally, I wouldn't, as long as opting in is somehow a choice. I think it's fine.
Okay, great. Okay, then we'll work on trying to, we'll try to figure out the best possible way to either, maybe it's a little bit of mailing out and some phone calls. And try to, like, we'll put our heads together to figure out maybe what's the best scenario to get the information out, and then how to proceed with the newsletter. And if that's okay, because we just sent this one out, if it's okay if we start with the next one, like the next one wouldn't go out except for electronically, because that'll give us 2 or 3 weeks here, and we can get all those things worked out and try to figure out how to either get the mailing or the phone calls done and get that information. I can get stuff on Facebook and on the website. And then I guess for you, and I know that some people don't have internet service and maybe don't have a Facebook, but the other thing I would maybe suggest is when we share stuff on the Facebook post, maybe for all of you who have, because you have so many followers, that maybe you could share that post. I know some of you do, but if you don't, if that would maybe help also get the word out, just because of the other people you reach out to. So, but we can work on that. Okay, great. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you. All right, next item, the food truck and other outdoor vending regulations. Ms. Duran.
All right, thank you, Mayor. We're here tonight to have a discussion about policies surrounding food trucks. And I think what I heard loud and clear from the board was make it easier for food trucks to come into town, generally. And so I put this ordinance together based on Brighton's ordinance because it was proposed to me, it must have been maybe by you, Trustee White, I can't remember, as an ordinance that seemed good and workable. But it's very drafty, and I meant to be such that we could have a policy conversation tonight about food trucks using the Brighton ordinance as a basis. And you can give us some better direction, and I can hone this ordinance for something that works better for the town of Lochbuie. But anyway, it's a start, and we need to start. And there's typos in the very first line, so that just tells you how drafty this is. It is on.
Oh, it is? Okay, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Maybe if I put it on this side. Is that better? Yeah. I think my computer screen was blocking it. Okay, so I guess we should get started on that. And I don't know how many of you had a chance to look at the ordinance, but the way we currently regulate food trucks in town is that it was a temporary use and only in a certain zoning districts and that kind of thing. And so one of the things this does is open that up to be an allowable use potentially in a lot of zoning districts in the town. And we do it through a permit called an outdoor vending permit. This ordinance does provide, and this is maybe different than in Brighton, but it just made sense to me, that if a business comes in and gets one of these outdoor vending permits, they don't also have to get a business license in the town. And that's because the goal, I'm gonna go ahead and take my mask off so I can breathe. That's because the goal here is to make it, a little bit easier for food trucks to operate, and we don't really get any additional information through the business licensing process than we would through this outdoor vending license or permit process anyway, and so it is set up to do that. Now, I will note that the Brighton ordinance, and this ordinance as well, is expanded beyond just food trucks. They actually address other outdoor vendors, including, maybe people who sell saris or scarves out of the back of a truck. And I don't know if, as a policy, you guys really want to go there yet, or if we want to just pick off food trucks at this point and deal with the greater issue of outdoor vending at a later stage. So I guess let's start there and tell me what you want on that.
I would love to focus on just the food trucks for now, and then possibly expand later.
And then, sorry?
Possibly expand it later.
Okay.
I agree with that. I was just looking at the chart that you had that compared different municipalities of what their rules are. I think that's a good launching point of figuring out what we want to do, based on existing rules with other communities.
Thank you for that, but I don't want to take any credit for that. Actually, Sonia on staff found that through her contacts with the city of Brighton because they had done the legwork on that. And so
cool.
that was very helpful, and I'm glad she put that in the packet.
Trustee Westcott?
Can you really quickly tell me what the difference is between outdoor vending and food trucks? I don't know.
Food trucks would just be a form of outdoor vending, so outdoor vending is a broader category that includes anybody selling something outside, basically.
Lemonade stands? I mean, how?
Yeah, it would. I think it would cover potentially a lemonade stand.
Sorry, I was just having a hard time coming up with
Be more like,
what else besides.
could be more like art, somebody selling personal art.
Yeah, you see that.
Handcrafts, things like that.
Correct.
Well, I'm in agreement with, let's just talk about food trucks.
Well, you don't want to muddy the waters. Trustee Ott?
I agree, let's just stick it with food trucks. My experience is we're not gonna have too many food trucks anyhow till we get some commercial development where the food trucks will come in and provide meals for the people that are working in these commercial things. So I kind of think it's not really that critical that we go there, but I'd go along with going with regulating just food trucks at this point. And, later when we get some more commercial stuff, it might behoove us to go farther, delve deeper into this regulations.
All right. Trustee Jeffrey?
I think we should stick with just food trucks right now as well.
Okay, great. That's my first question. I appreciate that. If you continue down in this ordinance, and we can all draw our attention to page 3 of the ordinance in the packet, you'll see that right now it calls about outdoor vending. I'll change that to just food trucks, and we'll have a definition of a food truck. But it says that you've got to get an outdoor vending permit before you can operate in town. We don't require, an outdoor vending permit is essentially like a temporary use permit, but it is a permit that would be issued just on an administrative basis by the town administrative offices. It wouldn't be something that necessarily would need to come to the board. And that follows how Brighton handles it, essentially. So that'll make it go faster, which is good. Most temporary use permits require a pre-application conference. We would not require that. We would require these permits to be very location specific, so that a food truck would have to tell us where they want to come into town and when they want to come into town and how long they want to come into town and what they want to sell out of their food truck. And all that kind of information would be required on the application. And then the question for you would be, one of the policy questions we need answered tonight is, are we going to limit this? Or are we going to just say anybody who comes to town and meets the criteria can bring their food truck into town? There's a couple things to consider with that, right? So frankly, a lot of your restaurants aren't going to love that because we're basically opening up competition all over the place against the restaurants. And then secondly, and I'm not just talking about numbers, we'll talk about location in a second, but on a pure number basis, so you've got restaurant competition problems, you've also got there are nuisance effects with food trucks, right? I mean, I love a food truck like anybody else, but the reality is that it draws crowds, it can draw some noise, it can create some smells, that kind of thing, which, not everybody loves, right? So if you don't love curry and somebody brings their Indian curry food truck in, the town might be getting nuisance calls about that. So there are considerations like that. So then I guess the question I have for the board tonight is, how open do you want the town to be to food trucks? Should this be something that's on a first come, first served basis, and we just allow, a few of these in an evening or a day?
Something I hadn't thought of. Yeah. Questions, comments? Trustee Jeffrey?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's realistically, I think of it as
Let them all in.
yeah. Well, but I also think staff should have some, if they've got a roster of, wait a minute, we got 20 trucks coming in this weekend, what's going on? I don't think we're going to get that rush like that. I don't know that I want to say the town's going to limit that. I really want to make that limit, because there might be somebody on private property having a little party and they have a food truck go over there on their private property, and then someone else does. To me, it's no different than putting up one of those little inflatable things for the kids, that you can rent. And I don't know. I don't know how we would do that, or what the parameters would be. So I would just say I'm not for limiting it. Trustee Ott?
Hard to do, so I wouldn't be, you really don't want them in residential, but again, as the mayor brought up, somebody having a private deal as they bring a food truck in for. The other thing I would add, though, is we need some kind of health certificate.
Go stand in the corner.
I'll go stand in the corner. We need some kind of health certificate from the food trucks, too.
What number is your?
Number 9.
So the health department issue we've covered. I agree, and that's covered in here. So I don't even think that's a policy decision. We got to require that. I mean, I do think the number is a policy. What I'm hearing from the 3 I've heard so far, and I've only heard from 3, although I get to see Trustee White's head go up and down or back and forth, is maybe definitely no limits on the number. Let's not even put that in here. The reality is, this is an ordinance that we're all going to work with for a while, and if we screwed it up and we're being inundated and the restaurants are complaining, we can come back and we can always tweak it. I'm fine with that generally. So I think what I'm hearing, unless Trustee Westcott or Trustee Kimberly stand up and say something different, is as to private property and the number of food trucks, we're not worried about it. Kind of begs the next question I want to ask you about, which is, are we only allowing food trucks on private property, or are we going to allow some food trucks on public property? And so, you've got Lockwood Park, and do you want to allow a food truck to park on Lockwood Park, or do you only want food trucks to park along Lockwood Park when there's certain publicly available events like, a town-sponsored festival or something, as opposed to, I'm going to have my kid's birthday party in Lockwood Park, and I'm going to invite a food truck to be there, and the mayor's going to do the same, and we could have a line of food trucks along the road there serving Lockwood Park.
I have no issue with that. I think as long as they're keeping it clean, taking care of what they're supposed to be taking care of, and somebody has a truck there. But again, like you said, location specific, be very specific about where they're going to be, so that they're not creating a traffic problem or risks or anything else. I think that's, if you're parking next to the park, are they making sure they're not sitting out, in the roundabout or something of that nature? So,
well, and that
they'll do it. So.
And that brings me to another point, and there's a lot of points to talk about, but we are asking for an 8-day lead time, and I know that there has been discussion about, I want trucks to be able to come in and apply on a Friday and come in that night, but the reality is even Brighton has a 12-day lead time. And the reason for lead time is because we are going to have to ask our public works folks, especially for those that are on public property, to take a look at what those locations are in the application and make sure that it's going to be doable, right? That it's not going to impede either pedestrian or vehicle or traffic, and that they're serving, there's a way for them to serve so that people aren't running out onto streets and that kind of thing. And so the way I've set this up, and I talked with staff about whether or not they could live with an 8-day lead time, is an 8-day lead time for these applications to come in. So
Yeah, I have no problem with that. I think it's sensible. Go ahead.
I'm going to probably be the Debbie Downer. I'm a bit hesitant to kind of open it up until I know where we're going to put it, because at least my bias is that, at least in my neighborhood, there's some people have challenges of parking, of not blocking intersections, fire plugs, etc. I would feel more comfortable if it was more defined of where these trucks would live. So, you know, whether it's near a park or wherever, or someone having a private event, I would still feel more comfortable if we had that a little bit more defined. Not that I'm opposed to either, just it needs to be spelled out so we know if someone's having a private party, what are the parameters that we're not boogering up traffic? I mean, half the time it's difficult getting down Willow on a good day, particularly after the garbage men come through on Monday.
So two things on that. One is that this, even as this is drafted, the application is going to require them to tell us the location. And we are going to send it to Mr. Johns to take a look at when it's on the public street. And he's going to tell us whether that location will or will not work. We're also going to make sure that way that no two trucks tell us they're going to be in the same, like literally on top of each other. So it is location specific. The other thing that this ordinance says is that if it's going to be operating within an HOA controlled environment, so Berkshire neighborhood, Silver Peaks, Blue Lakes, that we have something from the HOA saying that that's okay with the HOA, because I don't know what the covenants are in those communities, but I know parking is a problem in some of those communities. And so you add a food truck out on the street and then a lot of people parking to come near that food truck, that may be problematic. And HOAs may or may not feel happy about that. And we're not going to get in the middle of that. So if the HOA doesn't bless it, the town's not going to issue the permit.
Anyone have anything else? Go ahead.
Try this again. I think, personal opinion, we're making a mountain out of a molehill here. I'm not worried about a plethora of food trucks coming in to Loch Buoy, because we have zero industrial commercial to have one come out to service a bunch of people. So I'm not too worried about it, because I just don't think if we open up to food trucks, we're not gonna have 65 food trucks applying for a permit in the next, week and a half. I think we get one or two, that'll be all we get, because we're far away from, we don't have a lot of rooftops. I just don't think we would justify food trucks in the quantity everybody seems to be worried about. I'm not worried about the ordinance, because I just don't think we're gonna get that many. Yeah, if you want to order 50, go right ahead. No, I don't care. I just think we're making a mountain out of a molehill on this.
No, agreed. But then again, we're also making sure that we're covering all our bases and, looking at everything, just making sure that there's nothing outstanding. Mr. Cumberly made a good point that, well, like Berkshire, you're not going to park a food truck on the street there. It's just not going to be enough room. And HOAs will have that, they can add to, they can't take away from kind of thing. So they'll, if they're saying no, then we're not going to issue it. So.
And I think that we have this set up so that we won't issue it either for being on the public street and or even in somebody's private property. So like you wouldn't be allowed to put it on your driveway for your kid's birthday party if your HOA doesn't approve of that. So I think that the town would look for a letter from all the HOA communities saying whether or not they were in support of this. And I think honestly the town could even take not on a per application basis, but a blanket statement from the Silver Peaks HOA saying, we only allow food trucks on driveways, and, you know, if it's serving that house, and never on the streets in our neighborhood, or whatever it is that HOA wants to say, we would be looking for something like that.
So that would just have to be something else. that
Talk
would
to your
be
HOAs.
Annotated. Does anyone have anything else on this? Did you have anything else, Maureen? Or I
Let
think
me just kind of go through this a little more and make sure there was nothing else that I really felt like, I mean, unless there's something in this draft that stuck out to any of you.
Mr. Mayor? Hello?
Oh, go ahead, Chief.
Hey, I just was thinking, we've been talking through this earlier today and was listening to this conversation. And I just wanted to say that I think when somebody applies for a special permit, like if they want to close down their block and have a block party or something like that, or HOA party where they're closing down the street, I think that could be also an exception of parking in the street. But I think they would have to, again, special use permit to do that. But we were just talking about that earlier, and I thought you might want to hear it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have anything else?
So could I just
Go
make a
ahead,
couple
Steve.
of comments? And I think my microphone maybe is a little bit too loud. Number 2. So I'm concerned about just generally being allowed to be parked in streets across town. I would try and separate this in a couple of categories. One would be the food truck initially would be permitted like this if they're located on private property in a commercial zoning district. That would be like the Snow Corner where the Shell station is, or the property where around 7-Eleven is. That's about a 40-acre site there. Around the Family Dollar, and then the 20-some acres that are in Silver Peaks in their front entryway. I think there's about a 5-acre site in Blue Lake. That's a commercial piece, kind of north of the old farmhouse area there. And then secondly, I think if we look at uses in the streets, one of the concerns I have is that, you know, we have, in 2 examples, we have Subway and we have Santiago's, who spend a lot of money on purchase as well as remodel their building. And then if you allow a food truck to go in the street across from them, they have very little investment running a business on public property, competing with the brick and mortar buildings that are paying, you know, both property taxes and sale, and, you know, in addition to collecting the sales tax. So I think it's kind of an unfair competition for those 2 brick and mortar businesses if we did allow like a food truck just set up in the street right across from them. And secondly, or then also in the street, I have just a concern generally in residential neighborhoods. I know there are some HOA neighborhoods, but I think, you know, the parking is an issue, but as well as kind of the compatibility of starting commercial uses in the middle of a residential neighborhood because somebody thought it was a good idea with a food truck. And, you know, you have a lot of the neighbors around there that don't really like the food trucks on the weekend. That's their peace and quiet, and don't want the additional traffic and noise and lights that may go along with that food truck. So I would kind of look at, I think if there were a community event or a neighborhood event, then we could look at that placement in those residential neighborhoods a little bit differently. But I think generally, I would not, I don't think it's a good idea to allow them just a blanket across to be in public streets in town.
Anyone else have anything else?
To hear the board's reaction to those comments, to see if those resonated enough that we should go with those limits, or if you want to keep it more open.
Trustee Westcott?
I am feeling torn. I feel like Mr. Stamey made some good points. I just want to have a party, but not everybody likes a party, and I think that's a really good point. I'm not really sure at this point what direction to take, but I appreciate him voicing those concerns. I certainly don't want to create nuisance, and I don't want to drive away business. I think in my mind, when we originally talked about food trucks, really what I was thinking about is the fact that a few years ago, a barbecue place would set up on the Family Dollar on Friday afternoons. And I liked that. We could walk down there as a family and get something to eat and, grab some parking lot space and eat a little bit. And I felt like I was supporting the community because it was a neighborhood business and because they lived in the neighborhood. Anyway, that's the kind of experience that I want to recreate. And it's a good reminder that that's not always what it's going to be like. So I'm sorry that I don't have answers or direction.
Just to bounce off of that a little bit, like Trustee Ott said, it's not like we're going to have them just bum rushing in here just because we created an ordinance. I've seen people already do it, and you've seen the barbecue truck, and I've seen one. Where the heck was it? Oh, up in Bella Vista. Was it? But it was a couple of years ago. But I just don't see it happening and getting bum rushed. So I'm really reticent to say we can limit it, because I feel confident that our staff will be able to look at when they put in a location and go, no, this isn't going to work. This is unsafe. You're going to have kids running around here, things like that. So my point. Trustee Kimberly?
It's kind of hard to know if we're going to get bombarded or not. I think, you bring up really good comments about, existing businesses, but we can always make adjustments, like you said. If we notice there's more interest than we anticipate, then we come back and have another discussion.
Trustee White?
I think we should keep it open. I don't think we're going to be bombarded like everybody else said. And honestly, I think if a food truck was to come in, I don't think they would try to be close to one of the, 3 little places you're going to be able to buy food when Santiago's is open. I mean, if they want to succeed and have a good sales night, they're going to go somewhere where there's not other people. So I really don't foresee it being an issue, but I'm open to changing it in the future if needed.
Trustee Jeffrey?
I agree. I think for now, probably keep it open. The one thing I did want to suggest is on page 810C, vendors may only operate between the hours of, I'd like to see that be 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. So maybe there's a really great breakfast food truck that's going to come in. Also, I think about quiet hours, right? I think 10 p.m. is a good ending time, and especially if you're looking at a community event.
Trustee Ott? So.
Okay, Mayor, I think I have enough to be dangerous with just changing this a little bit, and I appreciate everybody acknowledging that we'll sort of pilot this with this ordinance, if you will, and if we find that we're getting a lot of nuisance complaints from neighbors, or if the businesses are feeling that we've in some way impaired their ability to make a living, we'll bring that back to you and change it. So I'll make changes based on tonight's conversation, and we'll put it on for action on an agenda. Oh, actually, because this affects the zoning title of our code, we have to have a public hearing notice on this, which we've already published. Is that right, Linda? And I can't remember, so I'll have to double check the date, but it's either going to be on the next agenda or the May 4th agenda, depending on
Yeah,
the
I'm trying to
public
find
hearing
those
date.
agendas. I had them earlier. I want to say it's on the 20th. No, I was supposed to, let me think about this. I have 3 going on for publication.
It's on the May 4th agenda, because we
'cause
had
it's
to give
gonna-
at least 15 days' notice in the newspaper, and we published notice of it now,
Yeah.
roughly. So,
It'll
yeah.
be on the 14th that'll be published,
Okay.
so, yeah. On the 4th, okay.
Okay.
Okay, so we're good to roll with that. All right, next item is town administrator report.
I do not have a staff report tonight, Mayor, so.
Sounds good to me. Breaking my heart. All right, mayor and trustee comments, and we'll start in here. Trustee Jeffrey.
It came to my attention about a week ago that there is another vacancy on the Hudson Library Board, and I did apply for that position, so I just wanted to let you all know that. And I will be attending their town meeting on April 21st, where all applicants were asked to attend.
The CML has some issues with some items before the legislature, decriminalization of, basically what they're trying to do is a school resource officer can't cite anybody for doing something illegal on school property. That's coming up, the legislature is debating that. They're calling it transportation funding, but it's nothing more than fees and a circumvention of Tabor. So I've been discussing that with Kevin Bomber, and so everybody knows they're going to hit us with more fees unless we can get something going to get some kind of amendment to protect the citizens from getting buried by fees that this legislature wants to pass on us. That's all I have.
Trustee Westcott?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of things. I've received numerous complaints from people in the Silver Peaks neighborhood about traffic on, and I know that other people have as well, on that dirt road that is private property, but people fly down that road, creates dust, and which is just a nuisance. Anyway, as I was out walking last week, I noticed that there was a police car parked on one of the sort of access points to that within the Silver Peaks neighborhood, and I wanted to just cheer. So I wanted to bring it both to the attention that continues to be a problem, as if we didn't know that, but that I appreciated seeing that the police department was maybe trying to do something to make people aware that they shouldn't be driving on that road. My second comment is really, I would just like to have some clarification on what our COVID accommodations are at this meeting. My understanding in making my decision tonight to come back in person was that everyone would be masked, because if that's not what we're doing, then that would affect my decision about whether or not to be here. So if I've misunderstood something, I just would like to have that clarified.
I don't think. I'm still following the no different than a restaurant rule, where we're sitting down here 6 feet apart. So as long as we're not interacting when you get up and move, put your mask on, and we're still functional. So that's my view. So, and I'm sure I'm not alone. Everybody has their views. So anything else?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Trustee Kummerly?
Just 2 quick points, just jumping off Trustee Ott, that bill for public schools and law enforcement, the sponsors withdrew that bill this afternoon. So I did hear that on the way in, that the pressure was just way too hard. And to echo your point about getting nickel and dime with fees at my Dr. Cog board, whatever we call it, work session tomorrow night. Again, I think we only talk about transportation, but it's nickel and diming. Figuring out a way around Tabor, including what I call a mileage fee of how many miles you drive a year. That's going to be your new tax bill to replace the gas tax that has been increasing decades, and plus with the trying to think of a good word. The extreme encouragement of certain government officials with electric vehicles that if you're electric, you plug in, you don't eat gas. So clearly we don't have enough transportation funds to maintain our roads and bridges now. So tomorrow we got a heavy discussion on recommendations that are going to come out of Dr. Cog about supporting those increase in fees and trying to find ways around Tabor. So, I'm trying to think of a way between today and 4 p.m. tomorrow of being politically corrected over my dead body. Are you going to give my support on that? So.
All right, thank you. And Trustee White?
Nothing new. I just wanted to say thank you for addressing the food truck stuff. I know that was a long time coming, and very excited for you as far as joining the library. I think that's great. I think that's a huge benefit for everybody in the community. I personally have prided all 4 of my kids being part of the 1,000 Book Before Kindergarten Club, so that's a huge step for us. Thank you for doing that.
All right, thank you. And I really don't have much other than we were sad because, normally we do the Easter Bunny, but we just didn't know which way to go with it this year. And my wife was not happy that I didn't break out the Easter Bunny this year. So I got to make up for it. So the Easter Bunny will be out and gallivanting next year for sure. And with that, now. Now all of a sudden I'm too loud. Now we'll go into executive session. If we can do that. So, do I have a motion?
Well, can we make one motion to the,
Well, we're going to have 2 separate executive sessions. One, and they're going to be separately recorded. Actually, the first one won't necessarily be recorded because it's legal advice, and the second one will be recorded because it's for a different purpose. So I think we should just do 2 separate motions like tonight.
okay, then I move into executive session pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, parens 4, parens B, and parens 4, parens E for the purpose of receiving legal advice and instructing negotiations on an annexation agreement.
Second.
Motion is second. Roll call, please.
Trustee Jeffrey.
Yes.
Trustee Westcott. Mayor Mahoney.
Yes.
Trustee Ott. Trustee White.
Yes.
Trustee Kimberly.
Yes.
Thank you.
And Linda, as I understand it,
carries.
there's a separate Zoom link for this that I just forwarded to Chris Price, and... Okay, well, I just forwarded it to him. Yeah, I think, okay. And so we're going to close this Zoom meeting, is that right?
Yep. Okay. That time is 8:43, and we'll take a little break here.